The 64th Wyoming legislature has been gavelled to order, and Governor Matt Mead has delivered his 7th State of the State address. We'll reflect with the President of the Wyoming Senate, Eli Bebout from Riverton, and the Speaker of the Wyoming House of Representatives, Steve Harshman from Casper. Then, we'll focus on education, and it's projected now that the shortfall we're talking about is being discussed in not hundreds of millions of dollars, but in billions of dollars. The chairman of the Senate, House, and Education Committees, Senator Hank Coe and Representative David Northrup, will join us on the Capital Outlook set. From Cheyenne, Capital Outlook begins now.
This program is supported in part by a grant from the BNSF Railway Foundation, dedicated to improving the general welfare and quality of life in communities throughout the BNSF Railway service area. Proud to support Wyoming PBS.
And welcome to a new season of Capital Outlook. I'm Craig Blumenshine, Public Affairs Producer from Wyoming PBS. We're joined by the leadership of the Wyoming Legislature, Senate President Eli Bebout. Welcome, Mr. President.
Good morning. Great to be here.
And Speaker of the House, Representative Steve Harshman.
Hey, good morning.
Mr. Speaker, thanks you for
having
joining us this
Yeah.
morning. Each of you had an opportunity to address your respective bodies early this week as the legislature got underway. Let's start right there, Mr. President. What did you tell the members of the Senate about what you perceive the session's going to be, your style of leadership, and how you hope they work together?
Well, first of all, it's very humbling to have the opportunity to not only be in the legislature and have the good folks back at home see fit to vote you into that office or that position and to represent them, and then to be able to be elected as a leader is truly humbling, and I take that very seriously. And we have an opportunity, both the Speaker and I, to share with our bodies, our respective bodies, how we feel. The one thing that I really want to emphasize, and I did to the senators, is, we had a very tough political season, but the elections are over. And we need to get together now because it's all of us. Not one of us has the correct idea or the solution to some of our issues. So I really think we ought to be working together. I expressed that. Civility, it's just crazy not to have civility. Wyoming used to be and still is, I believe, one of the best states in the country. We've lost a little bit of that. So we talked about that, maintaining the decorum of the Senate, respect your fellow senators, respect House members, work like the dickens on your issues, but understand there's space around everybody and do that together. And the other thing we got into is experience is a wonderful thing, and when you've been around and understand what happens, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from some of the things you did right. So we talked about what we might do as we chart our course forward, and there's a lot of issues on the table, Craig. There's a tremendous number of issues. One of the things that I was proud of is what we have accomplished in the past. And you can go down that list, and Mr. Speaker and I were co-chairs of the Appropriations Committee. We worked very diligently. Steve took the lead on, 8 by 18. He's a believer in savings on our Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. We worked diligently to put money aside, knowing we knew it would happen, but when this bust would boom, or this boom would bust. And so we set aside LISRA, we did the thing for education. So we talked about the good things we've done. We can be proud that we're, top in the region in teacher salaries. We can be proud of the amount of money we spend on education. A lot of good positive things, but those times are over. They are changing. So we talked about how we move forward. We are a citizen legislature. We have a short, finite period of time to do our work. Let's get started. Let's pull the trigger. Let's make some decisions.
Mr. Speaker? How about you?
Well, I think, my first words, my first words as Speaker was to really say thank you, and thank you to the folks who put me in that position. The Speaker and the President are constitutional offices. They're voted on by all the members, and so it's really humbling to have the support of your peers. There's no doubt about it. And then, as the President said, thanks to the people in Casper and House District 37 who've trusted me to represent them, the last several years. So it's a pretty humbling deal, obviously, and in all this, it's like all of us. Your family plays such a key role in allowing you to pursue this and do this, and there's so many people that support you. And I think in the House, and President Bebout's the only person ever in the history of Wyoming who's been the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. And I've said many times that's not by accident. And so he understands the dynamics of the place probably better than any legislator has ever served. But I think the House is a little more rough and tumble, I guess, and a little more emotional, and a little more, we're younger, there's more of us, and so, and I think back to my experiences in the House, I think we've lost a little of civility and a little of collegiality, frankly. I think most of us, regardless of where we're from in Wyoming, we all love Wyoming, we're going to agree on probably 70–80% of the issues. And many of us will agree on 90% of the issues, and I think many times we get focusing on our differences. And particularly, I think there's folks from the outside, and the President alluded to it, that are trying to divide us up and pigeonhole us on certain issues. And I think it's a real mistake, because it's a very human, complex process that is fast-moving. Debate matters. Our founders knew that. And you'll take literally thousands of votes. And so that was my message, number one, is to, really look around and look on the walls of all those who have come before us. We have over 125 years of history and process and decorum and the way we're going to treat one another. The process, really, to sum it up, is group genius, and the wisdom of the group is way more powerful than any one member's agenda or service. The institution is way more important than an individual legislator. And so, with that said, I think, we want to focus on these core issues of the state. And these core issues have been around since statehood, frankly. And we're going to continue those debates.
And I want to talk about those core issues. Obviously, the governor also spoke about the core issues yesterday. Budget, school funding, diversification, and prison are the clips that we want to show for our viewers from the governor's State of the State address, and then have you react to those, gentlemen.
Okay.
So the first one we'll have our viewers view is the governor speaking about the budget.
This reflects conservative, disciplined budgeting, the type of budgeting Wyoming is known for and proud of. State government has shrunk. It has not grown. The legislature last session voted for $67.7 million in cuts, which I know you found difficult to make. I made 3.5 times that amount of cuts in June, which too was very difficult. The belt-tightening begun in 2013 has continued, and I make only 5 general fund requests of you this session. $5 million for local governments. We have to continue to support our local governments. $2.5 million for Endow, which I have spoken about. $500,000 for the UW Science Initiative. $475,000 for the UW Strategic Enrollment Program, and $160,000 for tribal liaisons.
The governor's outlined 5 requests, the largest of which is funding for cities and towns. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that one of the very important things in the state of Wyoming, and as I look at it from my perspective, is that the best money spent in government is locally and closest to the people, and that's cities, towns, and counties. And you go back to years ago when we had certain funding streams that we took away from them, and we were always going to backfill. Well, along the way that got lost. So I support, first of all, the $105 million that's already in the budget. I think, Mr. Speaker, and you and I have talked about that as well, I think that's one thing we should leave alone. There may be some more reasonable cuts or reductions made in the budget as the JEC works and does their markups, but that 105 should be left alone. As far as the additional $5 million, that's emergency funding. Let's see where we are with the money. Let's talk about it. The need is there. There's no question about it. I'm not prepared to say I will support that or any of the increases right now, other than the Endow, which I think one of the hardest things to do, whether you're a businessman or you're a legislator, is to spend money when you don't have it to look to the future. And the Endow thing is really looking to the future. How are we going to grow Wyoming? What are we going to do about diversification? So that would be my take on it.
And we'll talk about diversification here in just a moment, but what are your thoughts about the governor's budget
Well,
request?
I think, those are pretty modest requests, and there's no doubt, I think the JEC will go through the process, our appropriations committee, and ask all the tough questions as they do the markups. The $5 million really is emergency funding, so if somebody's, water system goes down, those kind of things, our top 5 elected officials, which we call the SLIB board, the State Land Investment Board, will have that opportunity. And that's something we've had in the budget really for decades. And it's this $5 million would kind of complete that traditional amount. And, so I don't think I think all of us support local governments. The de-earmarking that the president talked about is, we've done a lot. it's gone both ways, really. We've had more flexibility, but we've appropriated a lot of money to local governments, as we should, and I think the support for local governments is strong.
Just briefly, there's been some discussion about continuing funding up now the tribal liaison position. Generally speaking, is that something you're supporting? There's been some talk about the tribes having a little more money into that program?
Well, before we get into that, Craig, I think one of the things that we go back to when we were the co-chair of the JAC, you know, we could recognize that government was growing at a rate that we didn't feel comfortable with. And we tried to slow that growth down, working with the governor, and you know, legislating is the art of compromise, and when we ended the budget sessions, we didn't quite get to where we wanted to in the reductions. And we left the last session, we didn't get quite where we wanted to. But of course, the governor, when he came out with that Craig report, realized that and made those substantive cuts, and he made the right decision. He needed to do that, and I applaud him for that. So we're on track. I just wish we'd have done it a little bit sooner. As far as the liaison, you know, there was an issue a couple of years ago where we were really getting anything out of the money we're putting into it, and my answer was no, we're not. So we had a lot of debate in the Senate and the House, and we put only 1 year funding in there. I think a lot of improvement has been made. It's very, very important, particularly I'm from Fremont County, and the Native American, the reservation is a big part of not only our county but our state. We need to have a good working relationship with those two tribes. And you know, they need to have a good working relationship between them, and I think that's coming around. So we as a state need to move forward on that. I'm inclined to support that, but I want to keep an eye on it. You know, money's tight. We want to get, if we're going to put money out, we want to see a return, and a lot of it is depending on how the tribes perceive it, what they want to do. So I'm optimistic about our relationships.
So far, so good in the tribal liaison program as it's now structured, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I think you said so far so good. I think it received 1 year funding for a reason. I mean, because I don't think it's all been so far so good. I think, you know, there's some deliverables, and we want to make sure it's actually working, and it's we're not just growing government for a position that really is not accomplishing anything. And particularly, it's all about the communication, the collaboration, the relationships. And so I think that's where the JAC and the legislature is at now. We were in the process of reevaluating. It's in the budget cycle, and that's where it'll get the close scrutiny that it should deserve.
You walk the halls of this temporary capital, you can't go far without someone talking about education. And the governor talked about shortfalls over the next few years that aren't in the hundreds of millions, but in the billions. Here's what the governor had to say about education yesterday.
In contrast, the school operation budget has been growing. It was $1.3 billion annually in 2011 when I took office. It is nearly $1.5 billion now, 6 years later. While student enrollment has increased 12% since 05-06, school foundation funding has increased over 91%. And now we see a projected shortfall of $1.5 billion over the next 6 years. This is a big problem. It is a fiscal crisis. It is a big problem that requires very big, very difficult choices. As I did last year, I again ask that we have a task force, or Speaker Harshman's committee, to be formed with full participation of Wyoming stakeholders to address school funding, because a year has gone by and things have not gotten better. We cannot wait another year to act. At a minimum, we should be planning for reductions.
Mr. Speaker, should we kick the can down the road and study this thing some more, or are there some things that need to be addressed in this session relative to education?
Well, I think, you know, this is not new news. I mean, we were sounding the alarm the last couple of years, and there's a process, I think, that brings people along. I think it's just human nature. I think it's the nature of our government that it's pretty slow moving, and it's probably intentional that way. I think our founders have set it up that way, but this is getting closer and closer, and we're continuing now to dip into our savings and spend our savings, and our savings will be exhausted at the end of next school year. And then that's when the deficits start rolling in, and there'll be $360 to $400 million per year, and that governor's $1.3 billion is basically a 4-year number, I think, and 4 or 5, 6-year number, but it's not going away, and so we've got to find a solution. So it might be a two-pronged approach. Maybe we'll put out a big idea. Maybe House Education or a few legislatures will put out something for folks to go at. It'll all start with an idea, and then everybody can have a shot at and amend it and do those things. And then And a parallel track, maybe this super committee that the president and I have talked about to continue work on this over the interim.
And you reduce it down and you've got cuts and you've got revenue. Most everyone agrees that it's a combination of both is going to be required here. Are we going to see cuts this session in education?
I think also there's other pieces to this. Cuts revenue, but I think we're going to use some more of our savings. I think we're going to have to. I think our people would say, how could you make cuts or revenue and you've got money in the bank? And I think, but there's more to that. We've spent a lot. You know, at the end of these last 3 fiscal years, we will spend $1 billion in savings, and we got about $1.5 billion left. And so we want to stretch that out as far as we can. But that's part of it. Our spending policies are part of it. Revenue streams are part of it. And we're going to try to break this massive deficit up into pieces. And it's all really come about of the drop of energy prices, which pays most of the bills for K-12. K-12 is about 65% dependent on taxes paid by mineral producers. And when our production and value goes down, so does the funding for K-12 education. It's not that education has gotten expensive all of a sudden, it's just the revenue's dried up.
Sure. Mr. President, what are your thoughts on how education should proceed in this session?
Well, I agree with the speaker. Now's not the time to kick the can down the road, and that's sometimes what we do as members of the legislature. It's easy to say we're going to study or analyze, but the tough decisions are when you really start doing things. We need to start. There's no question about it. And it's such a huge issue. We're not going to solve it this session. We may not solve it during the interim, but we've got to start. And I for one, would agree with what Steve's saying, Mr. Speaker, about how we would utilize all the different approaches to it. I think we need to have some responsible reductions right now. Education, like everybody else, has had a great run. And you look at the state of Wyoming compared to other states and what we get for the bang for our buck, so to speak, there's programs out there that we may not need at the level that we've been funding them at. But the way to really do it, and I've heard from my school districts in Fremont County, is let local control have some say in it. You know, you may want to, one school district may want to have SROs, you know, on campus. Another one may want to have facilitators. Another one may want to spend more money on special ed. Let those school districts have that input, the local control. If we make the reductions, and I hope we do make some reductions, let them see where they want to make them.
Just real briefly, I think it's worth noting that if the revenue portion of this debate is not taken up by this session, then it will require a 2/3 vote to be introduced into a budget session. Does that at all enter into your thinking on how to respond to the shortfalls in education this session?
Well, I think it's something obviously we've talked about. I think the other option is a special session. And you know, there's, whether it was this summer or next winter or those kind of things, that where the total focus is an intense 5-day process generally, that where you just work really
Is that a likely scenario?
night and day.
Is it too early to say?
I think it's a possibility. I think it's too early to say. I think all those options have to stay on the table.
You know, one of the things too, Craig, and Mr. Speaker and I have talked a lot about this, and he mentioned the 65% dependence on minerals. You know, people in the state, I'm not sure a lot of the voters out there understand the importance of what minerals do to the state in terms of revenues. And we get into the debate of access and being able to responsibly develop our minerals on federal lands. And when when you don't allow that, then you're not drilling, you're not developing, the resource stays in the ground. And by the way, leaving the ground is not an option for this state or this country. And so that's a negative thing we have to deal with as well. So there's a lot of different issues out there that are on the table.
We've got about 4 more minutes, and I do want to let our viewers know that the Speaker and the President have agreed to be on this show in this session every week, and we're pleased about that because times, I think, require the state hearing from you both, and I want to thank you both. The last issue I want to talk about from the governor's address yesterday, the State of the State address, is what he had to say about diversification. Everyone knows that it's an issue that comes up every session, maybe for 20 years or even the last 20 years or more. Here's what the governor had to say about diversification yesterday.
I announced the Endow Initiative at the Business Forum. This is a long-term planning effort for economic diversification. The acronym stands for Economically Needed Diversification Options for Wyoming. I seek $2.5 million for this initiative in my supplemental budget proposal. I'll continue to work for economic diversification, building on our successes during my last 2 years in office. However, as a state, we need a plan that goes beyond one governor's time in office. We need a 20-year plan. And we do not diversify to displace energy, tourism, and ag. We diversify to increase our economic opportunities in those areas as well to expand our economic base overall.
The governor has put forth the Endow program, gentlemen. You're starting to understand, I think, his vision. But again, we go back to this is something that legislators now and for the last 20 years have been talking about, the need to diversify Wyoming's economy. What are your thoughts today?
3 words: jobs, jobs, and jobs. You know, if you don't have the jobs, you don't have the opportunities for our young people, for those that are here, to retain existing business, to recruit, you know, you're going the wrong direction. We need to grow grow Wyoming, and the way you do that is through diversification. It's a political hot potato, if you will. Everybody says we're going to do it. Everybody says we need to do it. It never quite gets done. I applaud the governor for his leadership.
What's different today now?
Well, I think a lot of the things that's different today is we're finally coming to grips with minerals, the reality of that, you know, just because of the nature of it, we needed the diversification component. We're growing as a state. We're bigger now. There's more needs and demands on the money. There's more services people want. And we need to create more jobs. And Steve, I'll let Steve talk about the young people because he articulates it so well, but that's the part that we need to do. Endow's a start, and we need to do more than just the next 2 years or 4-year cycle. We need to talk about, you know, our grandkids, when they grow up, have a chance to come to Wyoming like we have. You know, both of us started out in different parts of this country because there were no jobs in Wyoming when I got out of college, when Steve got out of college. It's really important that we diversify.
Mr. Speaker?
Well, I think what the governor, we applaud his focus on this. You know, we've had over the last several years these legislative initiatives from coal ports, natural gas exports, the value-added energy parks, all these things, glass making, NCAR, all these legislative initiatives that we've initiated, literally dozens of them, but leadership changes. They move on. There's no one to keep championing these ideas. The contacts with these businesses and these leaders are lost. Same with governors, you know. Previous governor had initiatives. Nobody can remember them because he made the contacts. They're all gone now. And same with this governor. And so what we want to do, we're going to take the governor's program, work with him, but really even go farther. Well, we want to take Endow to the next level and give it a legislative presence and an executive branch presence. We're doing a lot of good stuff in this state already. The local economic development agencies are doing some great things. And we are at the state level, but we got this arm doing this part doing this, and we want to have somebody that's right next to the governor that can pull all this together, that loses sleep at night, that dreams a big dream, makes the contacts, because it's all about relationships with people, these big companies, and every state is trying to do this. Every country in the world is trying to diversify and recruit and bring in. And so we want to have some staying power into this thing and really take the governor's proposal to the next level.
And we need to really look at one of the big things too, not only developing our minerals responsibly, but we need to add value to those minerals. And you look at the kind of jobs that you create when you have a chemical processing plant or some of these big facilities. They're huge. The tax base is huge. The jobs are good paying jobs, and that's a part of all we do, plus the small business as well.
Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry we're out of time. This segment.
Let's continue this discussion.
I think it'll be a fascinating discussion to have here.
And hopefully it's more than, like the Speaker says, more than this 2-year cycle or 4-year cycle. Let's have a long-term vision.
Congratulations to you both, and Happy New Year to you both as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, we'd like to express our thanks to Senate President Eli Biebout and the Speaker of the House, Representative Steve Harshman. We want to focus now more clearly on education. It's been touched on earlier in the show tonight, but now we really want to get into the discussion of the education and more specifically the funding shortfalls in education, specifically K-12 education in Wyoming. And with us to talk about that are the two chairmen of the respective bodies' education committees, Representative David Northrup and Senator Hank Coe. Welcome, both of you, to Capital Outlook.
Good morning. Good to be here.
This is an issue that will dominate debate, I feel, in this legislative session. This biennial shortfall of K-12 education funding is over $600 million, which begs the question, what is the legislature going to do this session to deal with that budget shortfall?
So we put the white paper out, and we're hoping to get input from all the stakeholders and the public in what's happening in the white paper. We would like to get the comments still. Just because that comment period's done does not mean that you cannot go ahead and keep commenting to us. I've had 2 or 3 people say, can I comment more? And they've sent it directly to the good senator and myself. And so those comments are still coming in, and we're going to take those comments, and we're starting to put together a bill draft. And that bill draft will start in the House. It'll be a House draft when we start it. We'll take the House draft and bring it to the committee and see if the committee will take it as a committee bill. They have to vote on it to do that. And then after they take it, then we'll go back and take more public input and get more feedback from the public, from the stakeholders, and work it from there. And it's going to take us 3 or 4 or 5 days to get through it just in the House.
And Representative, I want to point out that white paper is available on the home page of the Wyoming Legislature's website. Your constituents can just Google Wyoming Legislature, and on the home page they'll have an opportunity to see
correct.
that page. Senator Coe, this shortfall didn't happen overnight. Give us a little history on why we are where we are.
Well, I think it's goes back to our tax structure. You know, if you look at the state, how we do business here, about 65% of what goes on in this state is supported by the mineral industry. And you can take what has happened with more pressure on the state to come up with monies for the school foundation program, for the funding model, as more money from the state. Due to local assessed valuation, the double whammy effect, we call it, the downturn in not only commodity prices, but the downturn in production. And so you see a significant change in local assessed valuation, down about 20% this year, if I'm not wrong. And with over 60% of the school foundation program vulnerable to local property tax, that's our real dilemma. The state's being asked to have a bigger share of the K-12 prototypical funding model.
The governor has used the word crisis to describe budget shortfalls in K-12 education. Is that a word you both would sign on to?
I would say that that's an awfully big pothole out there a couple of years out, so it probably is a crisis if you were driving down the highway and looked at one that big. It's 20 to 30% of the budget.
Senator Coe, does crisis adequately describe?
Absolutely, I think it does describe it. We have serious shortfalls. There's no question as you get into the future in 2021, 18, 19, that we have serious budget shortfalls. And I mean critical, $300 to $400 million a year.
So is it either of your view that cuts alone can deal with the budget shortfalls that we're talking about? Hundreds of millions totaled up into 5 or 6 years, billions or more.
We can't cut our way out of this thing. I mean, it's too big. You know, we took the Common School Permanent Land Fund Reserve account last year to actually fund schools for 2 years, and zero balance in there now. $560 million we took out of there.
Viewers might be saying, but you also have the Legislature's Stabilization Reserve account. Let's use some of that money here for the next few years. Education is that important. It's the Supreme Court has said it must be your funding priority.
My response to that, you know, having gone through de-earmarking and some other problems we had in early 2000s, you start taking one-time money, and you start funding things in your budget that have ongoing expenditure requirements, ongoing that are not going to go away. If you take one-time money, you get yourself in a box down the road that'll be incredibly difficult to get out of. And so I'm not in favor of going into the LSRA. I think we need to make some adjustments in the funding model, make some cuts. I would like to see 80 to 100 million in cuts out there, and we have a laundry list of things to look at.
Now, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jillian Balow, has asked that you not do anything this session with the funding model. Is that something that you want to sign on to study it further? Or is that something that can be done in light of the Supreme Court's decision to provide a uniform education for everyone in Wyoming?
I don't think we want to cut in the model in particular, but we would like to cut on some of those ornaments, as the senator has described them, that are outside of the model, and be able to look at what that will do for the funding stream and how much we can attain in cuts that way.
Senator?
Which are the categorical things like instructional facilitators, which is a $22 million.
We'll talk about those individual cuts in just a minute. I want to talk about how this white paper was developed. And again, I really encourage it's a short paper, it's only 3 or 4 pages. I encourage our viewers to go out to the legislature's website and take a look at it. How did it come about, and who had input into what came on the white paper?
Well, I can start that out. You know, we had a couple of bills. We were going to look at classroom size, and there was not, the Joint Education Committee did not support those bills. you know.
Increasing classroom size as a
Exactly.
mechanism to save money.
And so the idea of the white paper came about, and I think it's one of the best things we've done. I don't think there's any question that it reaches out to stakeholders, it reaches out to everybody involved, and gives them a chance to have input. Understanding full well that we are in a crisis and that we do need to make some cuts. And so I think the white paper was a great move, but it came about really from the Joint Education Committee. We created a subcommittee off of the Joint Education Committee to look at deficit reduction. 6 of us.
Correct.
And that's where the white paper came from.
Superintendents Association have input into what ultimately appeared on the white paper? Are other organizations across Wyoming?
I don't believe so. I believe that most of the ideas came out of the joint education, and we have pretty much taken those ideas and manipulated them and played with them and saw the repercussions of every idea and moved from there. So
We asked staff, particularly the physical people, to look at everything.
LSO staff, legislative
LSO
services
staff to look at everything that potentially could be used as a revenue deficit reducer. And it's a big list of things. You know, it's everything from consolidation to looking at activities to transportation, special ed. Very inclusive.
Let's start talking about some of those potential reductions that were thrown out there in the white paper, and I'm curious as to whether each of you have solid positions on any one of them. The first that I'd like to talk about is the elimination of instructional facilitators. That's one of the proposals to save millions. Any thoughts on that?
some districts do a really good job with instructional facilitators, and some districts have used them for everything, whether it's an assistant principal, whether it's a mentor, whether it's somebody just to go out and make photocopies. So that's a real controversial in the districts. We got a lot of different feedback on that. It was almost 50-50, but real polarized in that half the people are saying it's good, half the people are saying it's bad, and get rid of them. So it's one of those things that's probably out there that will be looked at.
What is the role for someone who hasn't paid attention to K-12 education? What should be the role of an instructional facilitator? It's different from a teacher.
It's a coach, basically a coach of younger, more inexperienced teachers, and it's an invaluable tool. I mean, it really is a good tool out there, generally speaking. And a lot of the success we've had with NAEP scores and other things, you know, Wyoming schools ranked 7th in the country now. Our scores on NAEP, you know, I think math and, you know, a couple others were in 3rd and 4th in the country. And a lot of people think instructional facilitators have been the reason why teachers are doing a better job.
Helping teachers teach better.
That's
Exactly.
right. The mentoring role is where they should be.
And I should point out that you've had hundreds of responses to this white paper, and you've had a chance now to look at them, and that people can still comment. But was there anything that rose to the top in those comments that you've received, over 500 or 600, I believe, that you've looked at so far? Anything that's really struck you as something that the public has given to you that's very interesting?
Two things I think were prevalent. The discussion on instructional facilitators and the professional days that teachers get, which is about 21 million. You know, if we cut that back from 10 to 5, there was pretty much a general consensus that we could do that.
Okay.
Professional development days, they call them.
Representative?
And the professional development days are those days that they get to use in district to help teachers in looking at new teaching methods, maybe a new way of looking at how students respond to a certain subject or whatever the case may be. It's that overarching looking at making teachers better teachers. It's that coaching from the district level instead of just the one-on-one like the instructional facilitators are.
Certainly the idea of cutting activities budgets in half or charging people to be participate in band or student council or football is going to draw a lot of comment. What are your thoughts on number one, the importance of activities, and whether that's a relevant idea to save the state, I think, $7 or $8 million a year?
I think activities are a significantly huge deal. Kids that participate in activities historically have done significantly better in academics, and it's all part of the maturation process that kids go through in high school, and I really don't want to do anything with activities, except maybe potentially charge fees.
And other states, I should point out, other neighboring states do charge their athletes to participate and their activities members to participate.
I have 3 grandkids in Southeast Denver, and I can vouch for that.
And they do that, yeah. Representative, you were a member of a school board for 12 years. You understand what activities might mean to a school district, to a community, and also to a student.
That's right, and activities will really bind the school together. It's what keeps some of those kids in school. They get excited about going to track or being in football first, and they go to track, or whatever the case may be, whether it's swimming. But all of those things are what drive kids to stay in school, and we would like to get the graduation rate up. We want to have less dropouts, and all those are things that are affected by activities. Those kids that are in activities are really driven to be in school and have good grades. In fact, grades are part of the reason that they are doing well. They have, some of them will have a qualifier that says you have to have a C or better in school while you're in that particular activity. So
You've voiced concerns earlier about, off camera, but still Powell travels to Green River. And there's some great travel distances in activities. Should the legislature play a role in helping make travel more equitable for activities, or is that something that really is out of your purview?
we get beat up all the time about yellow buses driving from one corner of the state to the other corner of the state. We hear it all the time on the floor of the House, the discussion about why is there a bus from Cheyenne in Powell? Why is there a bus from Green River in Powell? And those are the questions that we're hoping that they will go ahead and police themselves on, the Activity Association, the administrators, and get this to where we don't have to put our fingers into it. We'd rather not look at it in that respect. We'd rather look at it and just say, you guys need to charge maybe when you have a football game.
But I will say that on transportation, the Joint Education Committee studied the transportation side of what we're reimbursing at 100% 4, 5, 6 years ago. I can't remember exactly when. And we came up that we're pretty much in line with what other states and other entities are doing out there in our transportation reimbursement. So
the hot button topic, certainly in Fremont County, is whether or not districts should be consolidated. And there are other districts, other counties that are impacted also. That's one of the recommendations, or potential recommendations in the white paper, is to have each county have its own school district. Instead of 6 or 7 in Fremont County, they would be consolidated into one. What feedback have you had about that? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it should be done?
The feedback I've gotten on consolidation is it's probably not worth it politically. There's a lot of fallout that's going to occur because of trying to consolidate. Look at Park County. There's 3 school districts in Park County, and 1, 6, and 16. If we consolidate those, that puts everybody in administration 30 minutes away or a phone call away, whichever way you look at it in technology now. There's also districts in our neighboring, in Bighorn County, that have a lot of difference in just the way the districts are performing and the way the districts are attended. The group of people that attend them are different from the other group, and so it's really a political thing right now to be looking at consolidation.
And what consolidation doesn't mean is eliminating schools, though.
No,
correct.
And I think that is an important thing to mention. Senator Coe?
Just the administrative function really is the
Right.
consolidation part of that, but I'm opposed to it. I was here for the debate before. It's a political, about 15 years ago I think we debated it, and I'm not convinced that it'll save $7.5 million. That's the overall savings it's supposed to bring. I'm not even convinced that'll happen. And you know, these little communities in Wyoming, these small rural communities, they are focused around the schools, and that's just the bottom line. And we used to have 60+ school districts, and we went down to 49. Now we're at 48 since we did away with Jeffrey City. So I am not in favor of consolidation.
There are some that would say that, you know what, in today's world, technology can allow us to bridge that gap, but that's not something that you agree with then.
I don't agree with it.
Yep.
I don't think technology can make the difference up in how schools will perform.
There is another suggestion out there to reduce central office administration salaries by 10%. How did that come about, and what has been your feedback about that?
Well, I'm in favor of that actually, because if you look at our recalibration efforts when we looked at the funding model, the market analysis that were done out there and as comparators to other states in the region, our administrative salaries are significantly higher than what the evidence-based model has in it and what the market surveys.
Statewide, Senator?
Pretty much. Pretty much statewide.
Representative?
I feel like that if you go in and start playing with that it could be a benefit. We could make 10% cut there and basically just tell school boards, you know what, you're starting to pay too much for superintendent, for example, at $150,000 a year. Maybe you got to cut that down to $130,000. But once again, that's a local decision, and so we're taking some of that local decision away from school boards.
I want to talk about that local decision idea here just a little bit more in this idea that we have to make budget cuts. Is it the case, or can it be the case, where local entities can decide, we're going to decide whether or not to cut professional staff days, we're going to decide whether to cut activities, we're going to decide whether to cut superintendents or other administrators' salaries, give us the basket of dollars and we'll make those decisions. Keeping in mind your mandated requirement to provide a uniform education, where does that local control versus legislative oversight balance for you both?
I think it's going to end up with, as a block grant like it is right now. I mean, whatever we cut out of the components in the funding model, that dollar amount's going to go to that district, and the district's going to have the right to still spend that money any way they want to, but it's going to be less dollars because it won't be in the funding model.
So you think ideally, or perhaps a school district may end up having more control, but less dollars to work with?
Exactly.
That's our aim, is to have the school district still be in the driver's seat of how they're going to spend that money. We just want to make a cut out there. We need to make 2-3% cut and move on from there and get through this.
We've all talked about that can't cut your way out of this whole problem, though, and that revenues have to be discussed. There were 3 that I noticed in the white paper. One would be to increase mills, mill levies assessed for education. That would yield approximately $20 million annually. Another was to require the taxation of health and professional services, which are not taxed in Wyoming now. And I believe the third was to increase the statewide sales tax, earmark, if you will, a percent or a portion of a percent for education. First of all, are you supporting any one of those 3 revenue enhancements that were suggested in the white paper?
I'm not prepared to support any revenue enhancements at this point in time.
But Senator, you said you can't cut your way out of this problem.
I agree, but I think we need to go slowly. You know, I think there's another thing that could be looked at, and that's how we tax locally with property tax. We could change that 9.5% on residentials to say 11.5%, the commercial at 11.5% to say 13.5%. You can't do any more with minerals because we're taxing them at 100% right now. But a mill statewide raises $20 million. A penny sales tax raises $120 million.
$150 million, the white paper said.
Exactly. I'm just not in a position right now where I want to do anything with increased revenue until we have made the adjustments and have made the cuts that we need to make.
Senator, that said, do you think that the cuts might come first in this session and then the revenue discussion might come next in this session? Or are you saying that revenues may not be talked about in this session?
Revenues might not be talked about,
and
but
if
I
that's
can
the
tell you
case,
cuts are going to come first in the session.
If that's the case, how can that $600 million deficit be addressed?
Well, remember that we've got education funded for the biennium right now. We did that last year. We took the $560 million out of the reserve account. And I would just like to see us go very, very slowly and very carefully and precisely into the revenue raising discussion. I don't think we need to do that this year.
And is that a role then that this committee might play in the interim, do you perceive?
Absolutely.
Representative Northrup, what is your thought on revenue?
So we've looked at all the different kinds of ways that you could improve the revenue stream into education, and the overall argument and the overall concern is we would like to see something that would be different from what we have right now. And as good Senator said, we can't go back to the mineral industry. If we go back to the mineral industry, we'll put ourselves back into the same position we are. So that's why we're looking at some other form of tax that could be put into this stream to make this a more reliable funding source.
We've been talking about funding for school operations. We haven't even touched in this discussion about funding for capital facilities or for major maintenance. Holy cow. There's a black hole there now that used to be supported by COLEAS bonus funds. Right. Billions of dollars of schools have been built in the recent years in Wyoming, and now that pot is literally empty. What are the potential solutions there what might get talked about in this session about capital construction and major maintenance for K-12 schools.
There's a discussion out there that is taking place among legislators, specifically with mills for capital construction, that's property tax. And whether or not that'll happen or be discussed in this session, I'm not totally sure. Our biggest problem, I think our biggest problem that we have to overcome right now with school CapCon is the major maintenance that we're obligated to every year for about $120 million. And we built $3.2 billion worth of schools out there, and it is not good policy not to maintain what we have spent a lot of money on.
The idea is to have 50-year schools.
That's exactly correct.
That's exactly what we're looking at. We need to maintain what we have. We all do it at home, so let's keep our schools up.
And that additional mill levy money is a potential place for some of that to come from in your eyes?
Well, it's one of the places we're looking. We're still, like I said, everything's on the table right now.
And
it's pretty
remember
early
that-
in the session.
And remember that in the Campbell II decision, the Supreme Court specifically said building schools will no longer be a function of local wealth, it'll be a function of state wealth. And that's the real fact.
However, though, there's a lot of people who have discussed that the local entities have to have more skin in the game from this point forward. How can that happen, keeping in mind of Campbell II?
The only skin in the game that they have locally right now is enhancements. You know,
And Laramie, I think, is a prime example of
wonderful.
that.
The high school over there, $22 million bond issue to enhance that school, and it's absolutely one of the most beautiful schools I've ever seen. Spectacular school, very, very well done. And the local voters chose to enhance that. But I'm not quite sure how we're going to deal with school CapCon. The good news is that we've spent $3.2 billion. Our schools have gone up like this in condition. We're more into a maintaining type mode of those facilities, and so. But school CapCon is a whole different animal.
Gentlemen, we have a couple minutes left, and there are other issues relative to education that will be talked about in this session. One of the bills coming up has to do with reimbursement for Wyoming students who go to school outside or just across the border because of logistics. What is that bill about, Representative?
Districts have to pay. Let's say that Johnny's on the edge of the town or edge on the state, and he wants to go to Gardner, for example, or he wants to go into Gardner, Montana, Bridger, Montana, someplace in South Dakota. It's easier for him to just drive, his mom and dad drive him across the border and get on a school bus over there than it is to drive 20 miles to the local school district. So that's where we're looking at, is reimbursing those districts, but the districts are asking for that money to occur. It used to be a reimbursement that was a year behind. So Johnny would go to school, that money was spent out of the district, and then the district would turn around and reimburse them a year later. We're just looking at bumping it up to the same year that happens.
Another bill that's proposed that has come out of committee, and I think there are 11 or so that your committee has brought forward, is to modify the State Board of Education's membership to include the president of the University of Wyoming. One would assume that should be a no-brainer. Why is that necessary, and why is that coming forward?
Well, I might add one thing. The president of the University of Wyoming or his or her designee
as an ex officio member.
It's just to have a communication link between K-12 and the university and community colleges. We already have Dr. Jim Rose on there. He heads up the Community College Commission, and it just made sense to have this cohesiveness take place here by having the university in the mix as well.
And at the table.
Correct.
And
We're
at the table.
Trying to get rid of the silo effect that's happening. People get so involved and so focused in their own worlds that they're not looking out and seeing what everybody else is doing. And so we're just trying to draw everybody together and get them to communicate and talk to each other.
Last bill we'll talk about is modification to Hathaway Scholarship Success Curriculum Requirements. The Hathaway Scholarship has been talked about for a long time in this legislature and well supported by the state of Wyoming. What might change with the success curriculum with this bill?
Also going to look at how AP classes are as a grade. If you take an AP class or a concurrent or any other class that comes out of the community colleges or the college, University of Wyoming, those courses should actually count more on your grade in a 4. So is it a 4.0? Is it a 4.5? Is it a 5.0 if you get an A in that class? That's what we're looking at.
We have had quite a bit of success with the dual concurrent enrollment, situation with AP classes in particular. And that's the good chairman's exactly correct. That's exactly what the bill does. And,
There's be also a lot of discussion, I think, in this session about accountability and what that means. And also, I think people have the relevant question of, can education in Wyoming still remain a top seven in rank with the cuts that are coming down the pike? In other words, is quality of education going to be sacrificed in Wyoming because of our budget deficits? And we'll wrap it up with that question.
Okay, so the quality of education occurs in the classroom. It's the teacher, it's those people in the district that are making that happen. You know as well as I do that the interaction between the teacher and the student is what makes the educational experience happen.
Okay. Senator, are we going to be looking 5 or 6 years down the road here at a top 7 quality education, K-12 education scenario in Wyoming?
That's my goal. I mean, I truthfully believe in it. You know, I'm passionate about education, and we've done some wonderful things, but we still continue to fund education significantly higher, at a higher level than our adjoining states, and we're in the top 3 in the country on how we fund education. And I think there's room in there to make some cuts in it and still maintain, hopefully, our number 7 ranking or higher.
And we'll leave it right there. Senator Coe, Representative Northrup, I'm sure that we're going to be talking a lot more about education in this session, and I have a feeling we'll visit with both of you again. I want to thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Besides the outstanding issues with funding for education that this legislature may have to deal with, there's also the issue of the state penitentiary in Rawlins. Governor Mead talked about that also in his State of the State address.
In this supplemental budget year, I requested contingent funding of $21 million for Title 25 services, $19.2 million to address a failure at the Wyoming State Penitentiary, if necessary, and $104.2 million for the budget reserve account. This contingent funding would come from the LSRA. I also request the legislature authorize bonding to cover capital construction costs for the Wyoming State Penitentiary in Rawlins. After talking to some of you, I know some of you are not in favor of that. But let me just say this. Whether you want to do bonding or you want to take it as savings, it will not go away by not addressing the funding. I believe that the prison should stay in Rawlins, not just by the Constitution, but by what it means to that community. I also believe that we need to be prepared to, whether it is a fix or a rebuild, we need to have that addressed this session, including where the funding would come from.
And we'll talk about issues relative to the state penitentiary in Rawlins next Friday when we sit down with the chairman of both the House and the Senate's Judiciary Committee, Representative Kirkbride and Senator Christensen. Stay with us each Friday night on Capitol Outlook. We'll continue to bring you the issues that are important to Wyoming right here from our studio in Cheyenne. From all of us at Wyoming PBS, I'm Craig Blumenshine. Have a good evening.
This program is supported in part by a grant from the BNSF Railway Foundation, dedicated to improving the general welfare and quality of life in communities throughout the BNSF Railway service area. Proud to support Wyoming PBS.